So some of the vulnerabilities that we find cracking the password. I am sure you can poll at least 10 of your friends, and one of them has a password that is 12345. These are very, very poor passwords. In fact, a lot of passwords are cracked using these simple mechanisms. There are programs out there that can literally try basic passwords. Some of them are called dictionary attacks, where they just have a dictionary of basic words. One of the most common passwords is the word password or pass. You'll see attacks on those quite frequently. Tricking someone. We see in reports in the news where people are asking for information, and once they get that information, they're able to access someone's account. Recently, there was a report that people were getting called from a weird phone number saying that your computer's running slow, your computer has a virus on it, and if you give us personal information, we will be able to fix it for you, and obviously that is a scam. You'll see these types of phishing types of attacks, and they can be both physical as well as virtual. Network sniffing, another common attack, is where you basically have your computer and you have an application that is literally looking at the packets on the network. And many airports actually have very open wireless ports. Someone will actually sit on that network and basically just collect a whole bunch of data, get on the plane, but analyze it later and see what passwords or what information they can glean from it. Misusing administrative tools. These are tools that are meant to maintain the operating system or maintain the network, and they in turn can actually be vulnerabilities because part of its administration or part of its configuration may be improperly done. Playing the middleman would be if an individual actually is working with somebody who acts as a proxy for some other device, and we'll see applications acting as a proxy. So for example, you may have Facebook. You log in through Facebook and then use Facebook as a login ID for something else. Well, in a sense, you might be opening up your Facebook account to this other application and therefore creating a vulnerability on your Facebook account, which could actually give an attacker more information about you. Some of the other ones, denial of service, we've talked about, viruses and worms. Again, on the Blackboard, you'll see another video about the Stuxnet virus, a very complicated and sophisticated virus, but it goes to the heart of how viruses are now used as part of a cyber war weapon. And spoofing, which is basically pretending to be somebody you're not. You may get an email from Citibank, or at least it looks like Citibank, and what ends up happening is that you click on a link and it actually doesn't go to Citibank, it goes somewhere else, and then that application is actually pulling some information off of your browser to see what it can get, things that are in cache, so forth. So some of the common attacks, obviously, a virus. Everybody is familiar with virus. It basically may be a program that appears to do a legitimate task, but is actually doing something underneath. The video on Blackboard of Stuxnet actually does that. The virus that was built was specifically designed to attack a particular device that would have been used only in Iran for their nuclear power plants. And it was designed to know where that device was manufactured and what it was used for. And then if it found that, it would actually begin its attack, but do it so subtly that it would avoid detection. With viruses, one of the key things is you can write a virus, but the biggest problem is deployment. And the second biggest problem is detection or avoiding detection. And so how do you get these viruses onto a computer? You either have to trick somebody, or many times you have to trick somebody, or you have to gain some sort of access, which is much more difficult. People are usually the weakest link in this whole environment of attacks. Sniffing is interception and reading of electronic messages as they travel over the internet. Sometimes people accidentally put the password in the user ID field, and it may be an unencrypted connection. And once they do that, someone can read it. It's not uncommon for people to have the same password for multiple systems. And when they do that, someone might be able to exploit another system and then ultimately gain access to the real core target that they want, like a bank, financial institution, or something else. Spoofing is masquerading as a website and redirecting traffic to a fraudulent site. We talked about that. Again, denial of service is attacks from the coordinated computers that flood a site with so many requests that it crashes. You see a lot of these, a lot of denial of service attacks are really meant as a nuisance, but sometimes the denial of service attacks can open up other loopholes or other exploit and expose other holes within an environment. It's very possible for a denial of service attack to actually cause a system to crash to such a point where you will actually gain administrator access to a box if it's poorly administered. Other tricks: con artists calling to offer credit card account to obtain information. This has probably been around since the beginning of time, before telephones. These were people who traveled on horseback and basically said, give us some bank information and we'll take care of it for you. And then they go to the bank and withdraw the money. Phishing, fraudulent email that attempts to attain sensitive information. Again, you might have received one of those emails from someone claiming that they are a friend of yours and they are stuck in the Philippines, and the hotel manager is demanding $10,000 in order for you to leave the hotel, and they're threatening to call the police. Well, that's an example of a phishing type of attack. So there are 5 pillars for security, in addition to the 3 categories that we had talked about. And they are authentication. We need to verify the authenticity of the users. We can do this with digital signatures, biometric identification. Biometrics would be like fingerprints. You can actually do retinal scans. You can do earlobe scans as well. Identification, identifying users to grant them the appropriate access. So who is who we are, who we say we are. We have to identify clearly who the individual is. Privacy, we want to protect the information from being seen, very similar to the secrecy that we talked about. Integrity is keeping the information in its original form, and this can be done in a number of ways, but a lot of times if we're entering information, say, into a database, we may write it once and then verify that the information was there to ensure that someone didn't intercept, say, the first message. And non-repudiation is preventing parties from denying actions that they have taken. So proof of origin to prove that a particular message is associated with a particular individual. For example, a stock trade. You want to make sure that the person who issued the stock trade was the person who did the stock trade, but they also can't pull it back and say that it wasn't them. You want to have verification that that's the case. So some of the countermeasures against threats: firewalls are one of the most common. A firewall is a device. It could also be a piece of software that sits between the network and your computer to control the access between the network and your computer. And what it does is it acts as a firewall. It prevents access from coming in, and it also will prevent access from coming out. Windows two-way firewalls control incoming and outgoing traffic. You'll see a lot of firewalls do that. And what they will do is they will prevent external computers from trying to go through the firewall and attack your machine on exploitable ports. That's why it's important to have a firewall either on your computer or on your router. It is actually better to have it as a network device, because when the software runs on your computer, if you're on an internal network, it's actually going to slow things down. The disadvantage is if you were to take your computer and go over to, say, Starbucks, you would not have the advantage of having that firewall. By having it in software, you will actually have that no matter where you are. Virtual private networks are basically using the public network like the internet, but creating a tunnel between the two. So it basically encrypts the communication and says we will only allow access from this particular IP address, and the line is secured, so that when the information goes through, think of like the internet, and then there's literally this tunnel that goes through the internet from point to point, guaranteeing that the information is coming from where it says it's coming from. Many of you probably have VPNs in your organizations. You'll either have a card that constantly changes numbers, or you have a user ID and password that allows you to connect in using this VPN software. Encryption and decryption, these are really computer algorithms or even mathematical algorithms that take the data and cipher it or scramble it so that someone else can't read it without the actual key to decrypt it. So there's a couple of things with encryption that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about 3 types of encryption algorithms. The countermeasures that are used by security technologists, firewall, almost everyone's got one. Antivirus software, again, almost everyone has one. Biometrics down at the bottom, you don't see a lot of those, and there's many reasons why, because sometimes the equipment is a little bit too expensive. It also really depends on the biometrics application itself. For example, there are occasions where a biometric fingerprint scan can actually be duped by using a piece of Scotch tape, where you can actually put someone's fingerprint, put it on the Scotch tape, put the Scotch tape on the biometric, and if it's not sensitive enough, it will actually think that that's the real fingerprint. So there are different things that companies can use. And this is a trade-off on a cost as well as what you're trying to secure. How deep is the threat? How real is the threat? And what are you trying to ultimately secure?